Good evening, everyone. My name's Adam Trainer. I am the Local History Collection Project Officer with the City of Perth. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the City of Perth Library tonight for the first in our Music in the City series of panel discussions as part of the Lotterywest Boorloo Heritage Festival. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather tonight, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and Aboriginal people from other lands. We celebrate their continuing traditions, living culture and spiritual connection to Boorloo and the Derrbal Yerrigan. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. As I mentioned, my role here at the City is primarily related to our local history collection, but local music history is an area that I've researched and written about for some time. And when I pitched this series of events, series of panel discussions as part of the Lotterywest Boorloo Heritage Festival, there was a really great response, and I'm delighted to be bringing this series of 4 panel sessions. I'll give you a bit more information about the others at the end tonight. So I'd like to acknowledge Lotterywest as the major sponsor of the festival in enabling us to tell these stories and tap into the rich cultural history of Boorloo or Perth. So this series is something a little bit different for the festival. And then we're tackling more recent living history, and we're doing it through the lens of music and community. But I think we'll find through the conversation tonight that we'll be drawing on a range of other themes that intersect with everything from fashion to technology to the built environment. So I'm really excited to dive into the discussion. A little bit of context for tonight's conversation. We've called it Early Rock and Roll in Perth, and we certainly will talk about the early rock and roll scene. We have some veterans that were involved from the very, very start of what was an incredibly fruitful and very exciting, but very isolated local music scene in Perth. But I'd like to also talk about how that developed into a broader industry of popular music. And we think about, I like to think about rock and roll as the first sort of distinct youth subculture in music. And I feel like it's the genesis of something that really kind of brought a whole new wave of ideas and of thinking about music. And so I'd like to talk about how that happened in Perth. And we'll introduce our panelists now who will help us along that journey. In the middle here, we have John Mills. John began performing in the early 1960s, contributing to groups such as Johnny and the Strangers, the Statesmen, and the Prank Stars, as well as many more across a lifetime of music. He's played in venues across Perth, including Hops and Stomps, as well as in the city's growing nightclub scene. And he's continued to make music right up to the present. You cannot stop this man. John is also the co-author of Jive, Twist and Stomp, WA rock and roll bands of the 50s and 60s, which sadly currently out of print, but let's hustle.
Not available anywhere, I'm sorry, but you might find them in one of your local libraries. It's very interesting. Well over 300 pages long, lots of photographs, lots of wonderful memories, all in that, but unfortunately it's out of print, so there you go.
And there's a gigging musician, John. I ask you to use the microphone if you could.
Did you hear me clearly? Well, he's very good at contributing voice, as I'm sure we all are. But seeing as we're recording it, let's get it crystal clear. So we'll use fantastic, well done. You found it. To my far right, Peter Nell began performing with Clive Higgins and the Zodiac All Stars, later known as the Tolman. He later joined the Troubadours, who would become one of Perth's best-loved cabaret bands with a career spanning decades. The band opened 3 nightclubs, as well as running a quill company, managing artists in Perth and Southeast Asia. Peter later joined the Statesmen, one of Perth's biggest bands, who also toured Australia extensively. Peter has remained active in the music industry ever since, in touring, artist and venue management. And just to my right here, Jenny Wren has had a versatile career as a vocalist working in genres such as blues, jazz and pop. Early in her career, she was in high demand as a session vocalist who performed gospel, bebop and rearranged standards. Jenny performed as a vocalist in cabaret shows in Perth's nightclub scene from the late 1960s onwards.
She fronted the pop band Sweet Velvet in the early 1970s. She was a member of the vocal pop group Birdland, and she worked with rock fusion act Manteca in the late 1970s. And Jenny's also performed and recorded music in London and Canberra. So would you please join me in welcoming our... Well, I thought to kick off, I'd love to hear from each of you. What was your first live music experience? John, do you want to go first?
Right, my first live musical experience was with a group called Copycats. We were a miming group of five guys, and that inspired me to play the real instruments eventually, and that really happened in the probably late 50s. I thought, and what got me into music was we actually had recordings put on 78 records of Fats Domino or somebody like that with it, or whatever, and we would mime it. And I thought, I'm enjoying the adoration by the public, the girls and all that. I thought, oh, this is nice. So I thought, let's take up the real thing. And that's really how I started. So there we go. Walked into Box 80 and Nicholson's. They were actually called Nicholson's in Barrack Street. Spent £90 on my first guitar and amplifier. I thought, now what do I do next? So just went from that basically onwards, and I've never given up. So that's just basically how I started. Small groups here and there, just learning into the trade, if you like, what to do, how to play a guitar, get all the chords right. And then very quickly got into Johnny and Strains of Johnny Young, which most of you know. And I was their rhythm guitarist and also their spokesperson and also their manager for the group. So I worked with Johnny Young when he was 16 before he became very well known.
And we've got the photos to prove it, Sean. We've got the photos to prove it. We'll get in. We'll get those photos. All right. We will get into Johnny and Strangers.
Don't you ever bribe me on them?
Do you remember what type of guitar it was, the first guitar that you bought?
Yes, it was an Ibanez solid body, and then eventually, of course, very quickly I went and bought a Fender Stratocaster electric guitar and a big Fender amplifier. I thought, heavens. And I was able to play quite easily. My job was to play the rhythm only in Johnny and the Strangers, but boy, did I grow from that, and that's what it's all about.
How about yourself, Peter? What was your first gig or first live music experience?
First live gig I did was actually at St Albans Hall, next to the church in Beaufort Street in Highgate, and it was just standing on stage at the hall, no microphone or anything else. There was a lady playing piano, and got up there and sang a Nat King Cole song, and then I sang another couple of songs, and they paid me £2. And I thought, £2? When I started work, I was earning £3.70 a week. So Friday night at the church hall, getting £2 was pretty good. And then from there, sort of went on to the Windmill tea rooms in Hay Street later on, and met a lot of other people. And people kept paying money, which was incredible back in the day. So that's how that started.
Well, seeing as you mentioned the Windmill tea rooms, do you want to talk a little bit more about that and Coral Gunning, who ran that particular establishment with their mum?
Yeah, well, Coral was one of three sisters. They're originally from the eastern states of Melbourne, I think, and they're all really, really good singers. And Coral toured the world, of course, and her mum played violin and guitar and accordion and all sorts. Coral played guitar and keyboard as well. Great singer. And they ran this venue in Hay Street, which was now near Parliament House. And it was called the Windmill Tea Rooms because there was no liquor back in the day. But they used to run little, well, I suppose what were they called?
It was just an ad lib. It was an ad lib. If you happen to learn a bit about guitar, get on the stage, get paid 2 and 6pence, whatever it was, meet all the other musos, have a laugh, get to know them, and that's how bands were formed.
Absolutely was, and she was great because she fostered a lot of early entertainers back in the day, including Rich Carson, who unfortunately has passed away, Kelly Green, who appeared there as a teenager when she was Elaine Sharrett, and many other people came through that era, probably including Johnny. As a matter of fact, Johnny Young did in fact appear there once many years ago, and he would have been about 14 or 15 prior to you, John.
Well, it's interesting that those origins extend to tea rooms, and again, I guess the lack of alcohol being key to that, because it was very much youth music, and that wasn't as much a part of it. We will, of course, get further into the nightclub scene and how things changed.
Well, it changed because, I mean, the drinking age was 21, and the drinking culture really wasn't there for the younger people.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So, Jenny, can we talk about your first live music experience, your first gig?
It's all right.
Well, I can't particularly think of one, but I started off as a folk singer. I tried playing the guitar, but I used to get cramp in my hand. That didn't work. So, and I went off to do a bit of cabaret, on and on, and did oh, that's right, I did a talent quest, New Faces. That was with the folk duo, and went straight from work. I worked at Musgroves. I worked with this gentleman here, and I went dressed up. I didn't tell my parents we were going on because we didn't believe in talent quests back then. But I was talked and very embarrassing. So really, I suppose that was the most memorable one. And then I went to the Two Eyes nightclub. It was the only nightclub I went to before I actually got into the business. So I saw a live band there. I don't know who they were, but I thought, yeah, I think I'd rather be up there. So that's really all I can remember.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think we probably will jump around a little bit in terms of timelines here, but I do also have presentation. It has some slides, so I'm gonna have to go through some semblance of a timeline. I thought it would be good to talk about some of the very early. Well, we have already mentioned the windmill tea rooms, but of course the other couple of big ones from those early days, the Snake Pit for the rock and roll scene, and the Embassy Ballroom. So, Peter, John, any fond memories or any recollections about? For those unfamiliar, the Snake Pit was a lunch bar in Scarborough, run by an expat US Marine who was the imported the very first jukebox in Perth. And my understanding is that his uncle, I think, was still, or his wife's uncle, was still in the Navy and would deposit the latest musical fads on 45, which would find their way into the jukebox at, it was called La Spiaggia, and that was really the very first place that you could hear rock and roll in the late 1950s in Perth. So chaps, any of you got a story?
Somebody mentioned companies. Did you remember the Arena Drive-In? Yeah. Right? You Walter Road, Morley? Right.
Bill Vine.
I used to go. Thank you. A group called Bill Blaine and the Dynamics were playing then. I remember walking in. This is surprisingly even playing. And as you said, the late 50s. And there was Bill, George Andrus. There was a Jack Battison on drums. I just remember all these fellows, John Hunter playing bass. And I sat there and thought, oh, I was in the miming group, by the way. And I looked and I thought, that's it. That's bloody it. I'm going to buy a guitar. I want to do that. And when I think about listening to their music up there, I thought, just listen to that. And it really got me sucked in. I thought, I knew I had a bit of ability. And I thought, that's it. And George Holmes, oddly enough, gave me a few lessons. He now watches me play. But that's how it all started from my perspective. I've got to add another quick one, of course, is Canterbury Court. Saturday afternoons, they had what they call a jive session. And there was Bill Blaine Dynamics backing all sorts of singers, including the 16-year-old, as I mentioned earlier. I think his name was Johnny Young. I remember turning up with my offsider, a guy called Graham Mickle, lovely guitarist, and thought, we need him. He's got a bit of sex appeal in the way he sang He wasn't the greatest singer, but he was a showman. So I met him when he was 16, dragged him along. He said, okay, I'll join you guys. And that's when we decided to call ourselves Johnny and the Strangers. In the meantime, we had rehearsed a lot of instrumentals and that sort of thing. Had a couple of singers only last a few weeks. But when Johnny joined us, we were well on our way. That much work. I've got to add this one. He worked as a porter at 16 in the Perth railway station. He would walk every Monday morning down to me in the Yorkshire Insurance Company where I was working. What have we got for this week, John? What's the program for this week? We have 3 or 4 gigs per week with Johnny and Strayed. Really took off. So there's something to let you know. But as I said, we met him at Canterbury Court.
Yeah, a long time ago. And going back to the Snake Pit, Les Dixon played at the Snake Pit. And we're talking 1955, 56. I was actually at school with Les. And in the last year of school, probably 1956, 57, he actually got up at the school hall by invitation, and he ended up having the blood pulled on him by the headmaster because he got up there trying to be Elvis. And back in the day, Les was, he was like a spindle. He was a tall, skinny kid, and with the shaking of the pelvis and all that. And the headmaster, whose name was Sticky Glue, actually, we used to call it
Perth Boys.
Perth Boys High School.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, and they pulled the plug on him, so you never got to finish your performance at school. So that was that. But yeah, the Snake Pit was very interesting because it was based in Scarborough, obviously, and you had to, back in the day, if you didn't have a car, if you didn't have transport, you had to get a bus, which took a long time to get there. But a lot of parents wouldn't allow the children to go there because there was the bodgies and the widgies all jiving and having a great time. But there was never any drama there. There was a couple of police involved in it. And Andy Andros, bless his soul, he's now gone. Andy was the king of the bodgies. Never did anything, but he was the king of the bodgies. But yeah, it was great.
Looked good.
Yeah, looked good. Great fun back in the day. It was really great.
Well, from there really was a bit of a big move into the city with the Hi-Fi Club, the Coca-Cola bottlers Hi-Fi Club hops, which took over the Embassy Ballroom Saturday afternoon and would be flooded by sometimes up to 1,000 or 1,500 screaming teenagers. And we actually have some images of Peter Anderson and someone who's else has been mentioned a couple of times tonight, Johnny Young.
That's it.
And there's Bill Blaine and the Dynamics playing in the MC Ballroom there. I'm interested with that move from Scarborough, which did have a big Italian Greek population at the time, and really was very much more a working class kind of area, and I guess the association with the bodgies and the widgies. And as you say, even though there actually wasn't necessarily any drama, there was perhaps a perception by the public and maybe by scared parents that their kids might be corrupted. But I wonder whether with corporate sponsorship, thanks to Coca-Cola, and a larger venue, whether rock and roll perhaps gained a sense of legitimacy.
Well, I think what happened also is the fact that the Snake Pit was an outdoor venue and it was on the beach. So people used to roll up there and they're in their shorts and their bathers and obviously the tight jeans, and the girls would arrive in their tights, their flared skirts, the rainbow petticoat and all this sort of thing, and be a jiving sort of situation. But as you can see in this one here, everybody's dressed up. Because even though it's an afternoon, I mean, the general idea back in the day was when you went out, you dressed accordingly for a show, and you paid a bit of respect. But also, I mean, there would have been people near the security on the door, and you just had to be appropriately dressed on what you can get in. And the trying to get in the place was part of the main thing, because the place was usually full, so you couldn't get in.
I believe there were roughly 15,000 members in the Perth Hi-Fi Club, the actual club itself. And so roughly, if only 10% of those came to
Probably more.
right.
Yeah, but I was actually the secretary of the Coca-Cola Bottlers Club prior to that, so I can't remember any of that. So
Now, if I'm not mistaken, my next slide, yes, here we go. Now, I'm quite interested by what you mentioned to us, because here we've got something from, well, this is 1963, and yeah, this is something that you shared on social media, John. This is from Music Maker magazine. So, trouble with louts, Perth musicians perturbed with the way in which local hoodlums are disrupting public functions in the city. Are you suggesting, therefore, that this is nothing but filthy muckraking by the press?
I agree with that one totally. There was no real problems at all. There might be two or three unfortunately, might have had a bit of booze, because drugs weren't obviously the big thing at all at that time. They were around. I got offered it quite a few times, would you believe? Never taken a drug in my life. But when I look at articles like that, overall, everybody, I'm talking about the dancers, all that, would turn up and just admire the Gomleys or whatever, and hang around the stage when Johnny Young was there in particular, with this glazed look on their face. Oh! So we actually, when Serge got into the Beatles, of course, that came, and that was big for Johnny and the Strangers. We had Beatle jackets. We spent quite a lot of money on looking like, and obviously, close your eyes and I'll miss you tomorrow. I thought, that's when he first learned that song, and as you know, that's part of his life now, singing that song when he was doing that show in Melbourne. So with all this, a lot of it was BS, all right? But look, the reporters have to say something about us, which wasn't 100% nice, because a lot of parents did not like us. I must add, I was going out with a particular young lady. Her dad really hated me because I was a rocker. For what? I'm just a normal human being.
Yes, discrimination against hoodlums and musicians seems to be a theme that
You went through that.
runs right through history. Well, you raise an interesting point, John, in the getting interested in obviously the Beatles hitting and the music, in a sense, the interest shifting from American music to British music, yeah. And I wonder whether there was also change in fashion and instrumentation as well, perhaps due just in new technology, new instruments. So the images that we saw from the Hi-Fi Club of that very sort of American style, the slicked hair and even the instruments that the bands were playing. But here we've got Peter in the Troubadours.
we're recognizing there.
Singing from the left or from the right. Defeaters is where you're at. Singing from my left. There he is. Looking devil, wasn't he?
All incredibly sharply dressed, of course.
That's before we changed the name, actually. Oh, right. We changed the spelling of the name because we became a company, and that name was actually being used by somebody else. There were 3 different troubadours in Perth. There was an Hawaiian troubadours, all spelt similarly, but we changed the name to TROUPADRES, Proprietary Limited.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because I had seen several different spellings of the name and wondered which one was the correct one. So whichever one you were using at the time.
Yeah, exactly. This was an early one.
Well, we've also got a photo of this. John, do you want to explain this photo?
Right. After I left Johnny and the Strangers, I was looking to find us of a new group. That is me there. And also my lovely darling wife, Pauline, who is here at the back there. So, but she put up with me. It's our 60th year, by the way, in the marriage. And I really shake it in the royal. I really was. It's gorgeous. So here's the story. This group were called the Triffids. The first group. People think Triffids started in the 70s. They didn't. We were the first Triffids, with some wonderful musicians, And there I was, ready to take the sharp second from the left. He gave up, and I took over from his position. That's how he was a rhythm guitarist. I started learning to play quite a lot of lead. So that's the Triffids. You could see 1964, just after I left Johnny and the Strangers. So there you go. Loved it.
Now, is it Terry Tyler from the Tires? Singing, or is that someone else?
No, it's not probably.
No, not at all. No, he's a singer. I don't even remember his name, to be honest. He was only with the group a very short time, and he decided to do something else totally. But the other fellow on the left there, bass player, he was very good, went through several groups, and the fellow right on the extreme left is a Malcolm Devonish, who turned out to be an excellent musician, plus, as you probably know, a recording man in Germany, so I heard. So how's that for a fact of life? Yeah. He unfortunately is no longer with us, I believe. So there you go. It's history in the making.
Well, I think we can also see in these photos that shift, as I mentioned, in fashion. Here we have the Wiggle Picker boots, is Johnny and the Strangers.
There I am.
And those beagle suits, and a real shift from the American rock and roll to more of the British kind of beat music sound and look, of course. And I'm wondering, Jenny, by the time that you arrive a little later on the scene, with this shift from American to British music, my understanding is that a lot of the classic music was still played and it was sort of mixed around. What were the repertoires like when you first started singing in bands?
Oh, well, that was 1971, so it was a mixture of American and English by that stage. They still did Beatles stuff, but and with the dreaded Evil Ways by Santana, there was always a good number to do, because if you'd run out of numbers, you haven't got enough songs to finish the night. Do Evil Ways, and it can go on for hours. He makes the lead guitarist to go mad. Yeah, and it's too close. That's right. Yeah. But, yeah, I suppose it was a bit different from then, but yeah, I get that. Don't look at me.
Oh, no, I get it. Oh, no, I'd rather do that.
I just love listening to these stories, because I've heard about all these places before by name, and I didn't realise the slave pit was outside. Okay. And yeah, it's but I've never heard of the coffee shops. What was it?
The windmills. We're talking about the windmill.
I hadn't heard of that.
Oh, you're too young.
Oh, is it a nice? I never thought I'd hear that again.
There were virtually no coffee shops in those days. It was a tea room.
Yeah, basically, it was a tea room where all the users met it, as Peter mentioned. But no, you're too young for that. Seriously, I was with the Prank Stars in those years, by the way. So that's what comes to mind. Ever heard of the Prank Stars? That's all right. Well, I was one of the members, but they had more changes of people there than I've actually on Facebook doing a story of the rock and rollers of those years. I'm what, as you call me, a part-time historian. I have 600 followers on Facebook, but only musicians. So what I'm doing, whether I like it or not, is communicating with all these old buggers, and they come back to me on Messenger and say, look, what happened? Okay, I talk about you. But what happens, they come in on Messenger, what happened to such and such? Can you tell me where he's gone? Is he still alive? So that's what I do. But I do write story just to reminisce of what it was like to be in the band business, particularly in the 60s and 70s from my perspective. So it was wonderful. There you go.
Well, it sounds like in the 60s and 70s, we're sort of getting more into, I guess, the nightclub era. Peter, can you talk, because you own 3 of them, can you tell us a little bit about how the nightclub era really kind of kicked off in Perth?
Actually, there were a couple of small clubs around Perth back in that early 60s period. I mean, CJ's. I'm looking at this again here. The Top Hat. CJ became Top Hat, and then Whiskey Go Go. But actually, Whiskey Go-Go was a club originally called Top of the Town in Hay Street West. I was part of the Troubadours, and in that era, we actually were very fortunate in making a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, it was still the days of the pounds initially. And to give an example, I mean, when I was working in the government, and I was making £32 a week. I was making £108 a week from the band. So I had a run-in with the then chief clerk in the public works department because the band was working. Back in the day, the rule was you were supposed to you're allowed to work Fridays and Saturday nights, as a hobby, but we were working 5 nights a week to make a lot of money. We all ended up giving up work, and we had all this money. We formed a company. We ended up buying what was then Top of the Town, and we changed the name to Whiskey A Go-Go. But the first time we bought a club called the Playboy and Checkers, and we called it the Troubadour Club. And then we bought Two Eyes and changed it to Napoleon's. So we had 3 nightclubs, and then we decided we start an entertainment agency. We call it Quill International. And basically we end up running pretty much all the rock and roll entertainment in WA. And then we spread eventually to Southeast Asia. And we established in Singapore between 1968 and 73. And we basically ran all the entertainment in Southeast Asia for a number of years during the Vietnam War period with the R&R. But unfortunately, we had a couple of Chinese partners back in the day, and they like to gamble. Long story, but anyway, they place closed down, which is unfortunate. But things move along, so it was great.
Well, running 3 nightclubs, all in a fairly close area, how do you decide which bands you booked for which club?
Well, they were on a rotational basis, basically, because there was we were not only putting bands in our own clubs, but obviously in Waldorf and Top Hat and what was then the West End, which later on became Hannibal's and Berlin and all that. So there was a lot of other clubs around, and we were just basically sharing the morale. So it worked quite well for quite a period of time. So it just was one of those things that happened over a period of time. But it all imploded eventually. Things changed as time went on.
Do you think that there is some truth to the suggestion that as the audience aged up and turned 21, for example, that was a key aspect in the nightclub scene?
Oh yeah,
kind of booming.
Absolutely. Well, originally all the clubs that none of the clubs had a liquor license. They were all charging a cover charge. Well, they had a cover charge, but they had a body liquor.
King Browns.
Sorry?
You took in your King Browns.
Yeah, well, you took in your beer, and you had to pay a charge on each bottle you bought in. Then you used to there was other what a skullduggery going on. Maybe a ticket. Didn't you used to have a ticket? You had to get a ticket. Yeah, you handed your bottles in, you got a ticket, and then of course there was a lot of carry on going on with that because there was also stuff being sold over the counter as well, which is not what normally happened right through that era. And then eventually the clubs started getting licenses, and it just boomed from there. It just went crazy.
Now, was live music happening in pubs at this stage, or did that come a little later?
No, pubs all closed at 10 o'clock back in the day. As the bands used to work until about 9:45, but it started at 7:30, work until 9:45, pack the gear up. The gear existed. The band gear, basically, the foldback systems today are bigger than the front of house systems that used to have back in the day. So you just pack everything up in 10 minutes. You'd usually have a bunch of friends that would come along and they'd help you move the gear so that they could get into the clubs for nothing. And then the bands would move to the clubs and they'd start playing at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and they'd play till 1 o'clock in the morning, actually, say. That was before the licenses eventually gave until 3 in the morning. So that's what used to happen.
I heard a few stories about some hairy drives through town when you finish one gig late and you booked in to play another.
Absolutely. We're just racing around trying to get from one gig to the other.
And then lugging your gear.
Yes.
up
Hammond
stairs.
organs, the big Hammond organs, if you don't mind.
And there's all the little clubs like
Don't forget that thing that whizzed around. What was it called? Leslie. Yeah, Leslie Bob.
Leslie Bob.
And it gave this Hammond organ. It's
Score is
the L series Hammond organ. That was heavy enough to go up steps to some of these nightclubs. And we got the muscles, which I don't have anymore, to help carry them up. Then there's Leslie box. I mean, hammer was bad enough. So bloody heavy. But what it did is you could play it. It would send the signal, obviously, to the Leslie box and spin. You could see it spinning. And the sound would be, whoa. But I tell you what, it was magic. And everybody go, oh, yeah, like this. You see them in the nightclub. Probably half drunk anyway. But you could see it. Everybody go and say, oh, it's just so nice. Play on, and here you say we finish sometimes 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Go home. I used to have to go back to Vox 80 Music World, stand up there in the morning and, good morning, can I sell you something? Oh. I remember Paul used to say to me, I would be home at midday. G'day, darling, kiss, straight to bed, fall asleep. She realized I was fully dressed one day, got home at about 12 o'clock, 12:30, whatever it was. I loved it. Lay on the couch, fully dressed, tie the whole lot. Oh, and that's a fact.
Now, some of the nightclubs, I believe there was other entertainment. Was it just the bands?
One more on this one. Yeah. The Swan Hotels. Now, that was a group of hotels. They got together with the Swan Brewery, I believe, under a certain...
owned by the Swan.
They're owned by the Swan Brewery, and they would hire a number of groups just to do the rounds. And I was with the Peppercorns, I think, at the time, whatever, and several groups, the VIPs, the station, whatever. But we would go from hotel to hotel over various Fridays and Saturdays in particular. So that's how that went on. And it worked well for groups like yourselves, obviously, and all that. So what about you, Jenny? Were you involved with that at all? With the Swan Group? No, not too bloody young.
The Swan Group or the Swan Pubs?
Yeah.
Oh, I suppose you hadn't put it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Can I just tell a story of my husband? My husband, Mike Nelson. And he tells this story about when he was in the Statesman and they were working, because you were talking about getting from the pubs to the clubs. And he's packing up his gear after working at the Phoenix, which, if anybody doesn't know, is Fremantle Way, Asperwood. And he got his gear in the van and off he went. And he's on the road for a while and he thinks, I'm being followed. So, and he's a bit concerned about this because apparently at that time there had been, I don't know if you knew about this, apparently there was some troublesome lowlife were targeting musicians and roughing them up, see. So when he got close to the city, instead of going towards Pinocchio's where he was heading, he thought, I've got to shake these off. So we went into Mount Lawley, doing a sudden left turn, a sudden right, no matter what he did, that car was right on the back. And so he was getting really worried, I'm going to be late for this gig. So he psyched himself up, blew out his chest, got out of the car and stopped right behind it. And as he approached them, there was nothing but men in the car, and rough. And the chap winds down the window, and Michael says, what the hell are you doing? And the bloke said, gee, you're driving very erratic, he said. We're from Queensland, he said. We were at the Phoenix, and we'd really dubbed the band, and we asked the girl behind the bar, where's this band playing next? She says, I don't know, but just fire on and fire on. So yes, you could be late at a gig depending on what was happening on the night.
Jenny, what was some of your favourite clubs to play?
Oh, favourite. I quite like the Waldorf, actually. That wasn't it. Of course, there was Pinocchio's then. So that's an interesting one. When did Pinocchio's come on? Because you never mentioned it.
It's 6. Pinocchio's actually came around about probably 64, 65.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
around about that.
Yeah.
Because we ended up buying it in about 67 and changed it. No, the Pinocchios came after Top of the Town. So it would have been, probably 65, 66.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I worked there, and wasn't there one
Beethoven's.
Beethoven's? Didn't do Beethoven's. There was one that was a church in Northbridge once.
Oh, hang on. Church. Oh, no, that was West End.
Oh, was it called that?
It wasn't, it started off being West End. There was Ricky Tick. They changed their names. The comes Blue Me. No, Blue Meanies was actually also Napoleon's at one stage.
Can I ask the audience, are you as old as us? Because you might remember some of the nightclubs that we all struggle a little bit because we have so much going through our little brain. Can you see out of here?
Yeah, that one became Amazon on stage.
Amazon. Thank you.
Look at that.
It's the Amazon.
Amazon. Any other takers? How's your memories going, everybody? Well, you're too bloody young.
No, I believe Pinocchio's is still operating as a nightclub. These days it's called Magnet House. But in my day, there was Capital, and the Globe. So very, very long, extensive legacy for that one particular spot. Think about the, thousands and thousands of people that have been through there over decades, changing music and changing fashions, no doubt. But I believe Pinocchio's really is sort of one of the only continuing spots, really.
Yeah. It hasn't changed.
Has it changed?
Well, it hadn't. It was 10 years ago now. My son won the WAM award, and we went on to the WAMs, and I said, they haven't cleaned this place. Decorated because it was all sticky. How is that? So awful.
Actually, the longest running nightclub left in WA, which retained the same name, started in November 1969. It's actually at Kalgoorlie. It's called Sylvester's Nightclub. And I know that because I was one of the original founding members and owners. And it's still Sylvester's Nightclub in Kalgoorlie. It's been going since starting in 69. So it's still there. And never changed the name.
And if you come in 4 weeks' time, we'll be discussing dance music, slightly different to the jiving and twisting that happened at the Snake Pit, but obviously the longest running, continuously running LGBT club in the Southern Hemisphere of Patience. Started in 1975 and still going strong.
It's tight.
Yeah.
That was the top hat, was it? There you go. Right. Let's talk a little bit about the recording industry, which came up alongside the music business. I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of Martin Clark and Clarion Records. So for those unfamiliar, Clarion was Western Australia's first record label, run by Martin Clark, who produced all the music released on the label himself. I believe he started out in Hay Street, had a spot on Hay Street, and then moved to North Fremantle. Now, Jenny, you mentioned that Sweet Bella, who we have some images of behind us at the moment, cut a record at Clarion. Do you have any recollections of the recording process, or?
Not really. Yeah. It was a good experience. But I really don't remember much. It was supposed to be some chap that wrote for the Bee Gees was coming over and was going to engineer it. But I do know that the last 2 copies went up in flames with Musgroves. I was there 2 weeks before, and I saw these 2 copies before.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And that was an LP, was it? Was it a single? Right. Okay. Peter or John, either of you record at Clarion at all, or yeah?
I can mention the Croft family, Clem and Tex Croft, if you remember. Clem with a okay, so everybody knows that song if you're old enough. But the point was his brother Tex and Mary was involved, yes, and Mary Croft. And Tex Croft invited a Neil Farrington, who was a lovely guitarist. I worked with him at Docs 80's Music World. And I went down, played rhythm, and we recorded about 3 tracks for Tex Croft. Not so much Clem. Back Clem many times over the years, I think we all have. Lovely guy, both good brothers. And so that was interesting. And that was all done through Clarion, as I mentioned. So there you go. So that's my experience. Peter, you had experience with Clarion at all?
Yeah, I was at the Troubadours, and we recorded a song called Beat Boat, which was a song that was originally done by the Tokens, which is the Canadian group. They did Lion Sleeps Tonight. But we recorded a song called Big Boat, and it actually did all right in WA, but it didn't do any good anywhere else. And we recorded a couple of other songs which didn't do any good anyway, and that was basically the end of the Troubadours reporting experience in WA. But the Troubadours that moved to the Eastern States in '72 did record for Sunshine Records with Ivan Damon, and they actually did an LP over there, which did all right in the Eastern States, but didn't do much over here, obviously. The band was based over there for about probably 4.5, 5 years. So they lost touch with WA to some degree. But it was good days back in the day. Martin really unfortunately didn't know a lot about recording, but some of his records were successful because he also recorded Glenn Ingram and the Skybird song and all that sort of stuff, which did quite well, which was great.
Well, he really was self-taught, wasn't he? And it was
Absolutely.
he got the equipment, and the rest kind of came with that, didn't it?
Well, Marv was very fortunate in having coming from a wealthy doting family, or his mum was doting, and basically bankrolled it, and it was a learn as you go job, which you got to take your hat off to that. So, and he was next door to 6PR in Hay Street, and one store in one stage, and then he moved back to Osmond Park. Yeah.
6PR, right. They did have a recording studio of some sort. And I recorded 2 singles with them, with Johnny and the Strangers, which were never really released, but I do have them still at home, sitting on my mantelpiece. And yeah, we did that. And also 78 came out, instrumental called 5 a.m. West Coast Surf. And Graham Nickel on it, myself playing it was the stomping years, stomping, and also the surfers, the surfing music, fast instrumentals, that type of thing. That did, in my head, quite well, but it never really sold big. We didn't expect it to, but it's just something we as musicians now had forever to think about and talk about. So there. Sophie, how were involved?
Well, you mentioned the stomps. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that was I guess, an evolution in the music.
Right, here's a good one. Claremont Showgrounds. So you might know about this. This is an absolute...
Yes, you told me this story before, but please, it's a good one. So,
all right, I was with a group called the Vagrants. They were very good. Great singer, frontman Barry Ayres, lovely voice on it. Anyway, we played in Claremont Showgrounds. And the middle of it was a big hall, two stories. We were on the top floor, and we had a wooden floor that their stompers were dancing on. Now you think about that for a minute. So we would play, and then the dancers would be doing this to our rhythm, which is, this is good. The council heard about it and visited us after about the 3rd or 4th time we were there. Looked at the building, and it appeared to be moving. You think about a couple of hundred stompers. The Vagrants did very well. Lots of people there, male, female. Doing this, bang, bang, bang. They said, right, that's it. Finished. No longer play here because the building might collapse. And I've got photographs of a sign behind me which read, bit loud, "No stomping allowed." was put on our very last, if you like, gig there. Right behind it, I've got the photograph, you've got it obviously, which said that bold, no stomping allowed. So we did it quietly.
That was a terrible joke.
I wonder, since we talked a little bit about the recording industry, well, the fledgling recording industry as it existed here, the other sort of, I guess, prime element of the industry and a support for local bands came via radio. And I think worth recognising the contribution of Colin Nicholl, who sadly passed recently, who was the well, I don't know, I guess the organizer of the Coca-Cola Hi-Fi Club Hops, but also 6KY DJ. Did either of yourselves have, well, obviously you worked somewhat with Colin at the Hops. How did radio fit into what was happening in the music centre?
Talk about that. Were you on, Erica?
Yeah, well, Colin started off with 6KY back in the mid 50s, well, late 50s, I suppose, and that's where Gary Carwell started. I mean, a lot of you know who Gary Carwell is, and Gary was the office boy at 6KY. He'd actually applied for a job there when he was about 15, and Ray Connor, who was the studio manager, told him, go back to school, finish your junior certificate, and then come and ask me for a job, which he did, and he became the office boy there. And of course, you know, he just went on and on from there. And of course, he finished up with 6PR, and the rest of the say is history. He worked with Jenny Seaton for a number of years, and Gary hasn't been well lately, unfortunately, as well. But the Coca-Cola Bottlers Club started at 6KY, and it was part of a radio program. And then when Colin got involved, he induced Coca-Cola to support it, and they became the sponsors, and that from there it just grew into the dance sort of form with the rock and roll band music era, and then they moved on and ended up at not just Canterbury Court, but they ended up at obviously the Embassy Ballroom, and it became a huge thing for a long period of time.
And John, was this another one of your stories? But I don't know whether it was or not. But a lot of the early rock and roll musos would actually go into, because the only place you could get the records was the stations, and so some of the musos would actually go in while the DJs were on. They'd be in another room listening and practicing and learning how to play the tunes.
Yes, that is actual fact. What happened? Johnny Under's Strange is a good example. Johnny Under and I would meander into a couple of radio stations, say, look, what's the latest hits? What's big in America? What's coming out of the UK? This is even prior to the Beatles. And they would say, oh, yeah, we've got these singles. And they would also get 3 or 4 copies of the same single anyway, in case one got damaged before they broadcast it. So they'd give us these singles. Of course, we'd go home, put it on a thing called a turntable, put this record on top of it, and we'd listen and listen and listen and think, all right, we'll do that. What are the words? And we have to concentrate on that, like you said. A youngie would have to understand what the vocals were all about, learn the lyrics, and I would have to learn the rhythms and all that. And that's how we did it, just by going up, knocking late at night sometimes, 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, to these different DJs. They were very helpful. So you were promoting the music for Perth and the people there. Is that quite right?
Now, obviously, through this whole period, it was, I'm assuming, exclusively other people's music. Did original music ever get a looking?
Once again, I'd have to agree. It was basically we would copy. We would do the Beatles, we do the Buddy Hollies, we do the Jerry Lee Lewis, the Chet Berrys. By the way, bloody beautiful. Elvis, etc. So that was very common. We didn't even really think about producing singles, apart from that one instrumental that was written by another musician for us, which never sold. But no, generally speaking, it was just copy. Yes.
Now, we mentioned Les Dixon earlier as really one of the sort of very early progenitors of rock and roll in Perth. And Les did record an original composition by the name Stingy Mingy Martin.
Yes.
And I think about 1956 or 1957 or 8, possibly. It's a great tune, but yeah, not a lot of audience demand
No.
for original music.
No, it wasn't. And that predated Martin. He did that one around the corner here. I can't remember the name of the studio. It's long gone.
Yeah, well, we were talking, in the pre-Clarion days, the one place there, where you could actually go was the advertising jingle studios.
That's the one.
And the whole band would go in the room and single mic and you just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything was single mic back in the day. No such thing as overdubbing and all that sort of stuff. Actually, most of the groups that played in those days, they only had one mic on the stage. You might have 3 or 4 people singing, but they'd all have to gather around one microphone. Are you looking for this, John? Look at that recording studio. Martin Club. What is that one? That was.
Yeah, right.
While you reminisce, one of the things that Martin Clouds did was write to Sam Phillips of Sun Records in Memphis and asked him for the plans to Sun Records, the architectural plans.
Was a build.
He did, and my understanding is that Sam Phillips sent him the plans, said, "Yeah, sure, here you go," and basically Martin replicated Sun Records here in Perth. Obviously, Clarion Records didn't necessarily replicate the success of Sun Records or the global recognition, but nonetheless, certainly iconic sound and enable, or iconic design perhaps, enabled Martin again to do what he needed to get the recording industry off the ground.
Now, I can add to this. I do have in this book the recording studios in Western Australia, ATS, right? They recalled, obviously the AM radios, we know that. Armstrong Studios. Yeah. So there was Bale Records.
I'm going to go through alphabetically.
Would you like? Yes, it is like many of them. It was Bell Records, thank you. Hay Street. And there was Blanks Recording Studio, Hay Street, West Perth. Buellers, Buellers Records in West Perth. And obviously Clarion. So there's quite a few. You don't realise it, do you? I was involved with 2 of them only myself, but there you go.
Jay, I'm interested to know, because you were involved in Manteca, for example, who you performed with. That was a more original musical output. Is that right?
Well, not really. No, but still, no, there was still, everyone was doing covers. So there were, Manteca, they did all the Herbie Hancocks, or, all that sort of music. And we were sort of doing the Manhattan Transfer sort of music. And, still covers.
How about, because you became more involved in the jazz scene later in your career, was there a different approach to how you would tackle the music? Whereas in the cover bands, I just said it there, the cover band scene, really, was there perhaps more of an approach where you wanted to replicate the sound that people knew? Whereas in Manteca, for example, or some of the other fusion bands, was there a bit more of a focus on, I guess, musicianship and doing something different with the music?
Yes, well, in the jazz scene, and I'm not I don't consider myself a jazz singer, but you do have a chance to, do different arrangements of songs. You don't copy them like you did with in the old days of the rock and roll. But just colours, but done differently. There's millions of ways you can sing a jazz song. Things like that.
John and Peter, as you progressed through, was there any ever any sort of for example, Johnny Young recorded his own tunes they were his tunes, although they were written by others, and there was but they were tunes that belonged to him. Was there ever any sort of original music in any of the bands that you played in?
Yeah, well, I mean, John obviously is a great songwriter. He's still making a lot of money out of royalties and whatever, because he's one. Obviously, he wrote a real thing, and he wrote for a number of different people, and which was great. I mean, in that era, there were a lot of young bands who used to try and do original material, and unfortunately, a lot of the material's not so good. And when we were running the agency, we used to get bands coming along and say, "Oh, we're the real original band. You know, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that." And we'd say, "Well, we're not going to play any of this cover crap. We're going to be original." And we say, "Well, hang on a minute. Then what's wrong with popular music? Every popular song ever written was an original once. The fact that it became popular doesn't make it rubbish. I mean, Simple Simon Says." Or what's the other one? On the Banks of the River. I mean, those songs, musicians hate those songs. A lot of musicians hate those songs, but they're very, very popular. They made millions and millions of dollars. So my attitude to the bands used to be, look, if you think you're so good, play some popular songs, get people on the dance floor, then throw your songs in. If you clear the dance floor, you're playing rubbish. Go back to square. And that's the way it is. It's happened to a couple of bands over here. I mean, there was a very, very popular band back in the 80s, probably the late 70s and 80 periods, a band called the Fingerprints. I don't know if anybody remembers the Fingerprints. They were making a lot of money. I mean, they were making about 10 grand a week, which is a lot of money back then. And they've been managed by Pinky Hayes, who owns the Oxford Hotel still. But they'd saved up about 60 grand, bought a truck, bought a great PLA system and all that, decided they wanted to do original music, but they were going to go to Melbourne. And they were going to spend 3 months in Melbourne living off, they'd saved up all this money, record all this stuff in Melbourne and come back here and, be famous. And we sort of advised them that, look, if you go over there and you run out of money and you want to come back here and you need to replenish the coffers, as I was in partnership with another gentleman, I was unfortunately, Trevor Bursley, who's passed away, we sort of said to him, look, we can give you 6 weeks work here. You'll make another 60 grand in 6 weeks. Come back here doing what the people already know what you're doing and what they're expecting to get. So unless your music that you recorded over there is any good, don't come back here and try and foist all the new stuff on your things. Come back here playing what they're expecting, throw a few of your songs in and see how you go. Cut long story short, we booked it for 6 weeks. We had to cancel them after 3 weeks because they wouldn't listen, played all the original music, cleared out all the menus within 3 weeks. Unlike the Farris brothers, we'd advise them to do the same thing. They went over there, they came back as In Excess. And they were successes in excess.
My understanding was that their original material didn't go down particularly well, though, when they were playing it.
Not additional.
But they did make a lot of money touring as a cover band through regional Western Australia. And
Absolutely, yes.
Playing regionally. Well, we might throw to the audience because there have been a few recollections coming through already, and I feel like there might be some folks that are interested in contributing or asking a question of our panelists. Sharon or Gabriella, could I ask one of you perhaps to be on mic duties and pass the mic around if there's anyone. While you have a think about your potential questions, that anyone got any legendary gig stories or anecdotes that you haven't already told us about? I don't know, favorite gig stories. Or does anyone have anything they'd like to?
Can I answer a question? Look, I'm not going to talk about me because I went down the same track here. But what I'd like to know is, why did people come to Narrows? Okay, so I must stand up not to go. Is there any musicians here? Okay, come on. Who are you? Who was playing with?
Drew was the singer of a band for many years at Stops.
Yeah, what was that band called?
I was a teenager. Did you want to call? I was a teenager. What is now I grew up in Scarborough.
Oh,
I'll go out, boys. I don't grew up in Scarborough, so I was very fortunate that I happened to be a 12, 13-year-old and with not far from the beach, we were able to go down every Sunday afternoon to the snake pit.
right.
And that's what gelled with me with music for a start, and never left it ever before. And then when the band started, local bands, which one you didn't mention, I was hoping you'd mention it, so probably one of my favourite bands who weren't Western Australia is Ray Hoff and the Offbeats.
Right.
What does it say for me?
Yeah, well, that was a good question. Ralph the officers. He had the first group, if you like, to bring in his brass into the group to make it sound nice and fat. They were really very good. Ray Hoff had a unique style of singing. He was more a blues man. I was to know Ray fairly well, never played in the group. My closest mate even now is a Graham Nicol, who was with me with the Strangers, did the recordings with Ray Hoff. Ray Hoff came out with about 3 singles, which I remember quite well, beautifully played, and that's Ray Hoff. And he was very much admired by ourselves, saying, wow, this is a bit different. This sounds fat. It's just music. Really you want to tap your feet. That's how good Ray Hoff was.
Band with Terry Walker on guitar.
Terry Walker, yes, he is.
He's theatre in Scarborough as a young fella.
What's the name of the theatre? Yeah. What's the name of the place?
Rory O'Rourke's, if you ever say that.
Yeah, Mr. Gasser. Yeah,
Is it called?
Yeah.
Can you remember what it was called originally?
what was the where they played?
The theatre was a movie theatre, still there. And but it out, and Hoffy and the band used to play in there. And
That's right. Yeah, they drew the crowds in. Ray had his style. He was also very good on the blues dance as well.
yes, he was Andre de Mola.
He was staggering. That man, Andre de Mola, is an artist. He does some painting and all that sort of thing. He's just one of those guys who's got everything going for him. Yes, he could play anything. They was so good. But he got a reputation for being too bloody loud. And people would back off. Oh, geez, he's good, but...
Don't ever put yourself down about cover bands and all that either, because the way you guys impacted on me as a young bloke, I loved it. Like,
Oh, thank you.
even as I got through into the later teens, when I'm still underage, because 21, my other favourite venue was the Zanzibar. Yeah. And that thens over to 3 o'clock in the morning, so King Brown's there at 3 o'clock in the morning with musos. I never knew half their names, but there was those really good musicians who used to play in there at night. They'd never got any recognition. But what you blokes did was just absolutely fair, because I've got you.
On behalf of everyone.
Too, Bobby.
Jeff, if you rolled my voice right before then, so will be
I was there.
You're too young.
I was there in 2010 down at the Swan Yacht Club when you'd had the big day down there. That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much for what you two have done. I don't know. Jenny, I know.
I'd just ask you as a young fellow, because I grew up next to George and Stank Borisovich from the Zodiac. I don't know if you... But he had an organ. He had the B. Leslie organ, and they used to have to hump it through, and he had to keep the van, but he couldn't be bothered taking it out of the van, the Zodiac van, which was a big red thing they used to park in the driveway. I was a little youngster, and I don't know if you know, Stan used to have the music shop in Midland. They kind of inspired me to get into music and stuff like that. And we sort of men make Greek there. We sort of kick around at it, but we're not playing seriously. But we enjoy the practicing and just rehearsing for fun. Like a couple of gigs a year. So, yeah, thank you for what you've done.
So no other musicians? Oh, we got one more. Sorry.
I think we have one more question over here, and then, yeah.
I was talking to John earlier. Holy's Battle of the Sounds takes me back. And I was just wondering, any recollections of who might have been successful and why would you be successful to win that competition?
When I think about it, I was in, I think, 3 battles of the bands with different groups. Never with Johnny and the Strangers, because we were quite a high profile for 2 years in a row, doing the Johnny O'Keefe show, that type of thing with lots of people, unbelievable. So that was something that I'll never forget, obviously, autographs, all that, photographs, that sort of thing. But when it came to all these shows, Hoadley's Battle of the Bands, all that gave all these groups, but there's always a group, when we think that, Pete, that really stood out, either just musically, if it was an original song or something, or if they were able to get the crowds to participate in what they were doing. You could tell almost by their swaying and that sort of thing. But some of the groups, like I think Ray Hoffney or Fitch would be a good example. It really got the people going. And with Johnny Stranger, we never got involved with the Battle of the Sound or Battle of the Bands, whatever. So that was my side of it. So what's your side, Pete? What do you think?
Well, but actually, the only band I can recall now that actually entered and they actually ended up coming, I reckon they got robbed, but they came second was Mark IV.
That's right.
And that would have been about 1970, 1969 or 1970. And they flew to Melbourne and Melbourne or Sydney? It's Melbourne. And they did very well. Kevin Smith was fronting the band at the time with Johnny Lemin in the band and a few other people, and they did very, very well. But they did get robbed. Went to an Eastern States band called the Executives.
There must be more questions. Come on.
I think Bakery won 1 year, didn't it? The Battle of the Bands.
Got one here.
Yeah, just to finish that. No, that's all right. Just to finish off the Hoadley's Bells of the Sounds. Yeah, Bakery did win in about 1970, I think. Yeah. And I believe the other band that did fairly well one year was the Valentines, which is one of Bon Scott's early bands. What was your question?
It's funny that my question is similar to that. I think you already answered that, but to Jane, Peter, and John, I was just wondering if you ever bought some sort of international recognition outside Australia, or even way after your peak A's as songwriters, individuals, or as a man.
Oh no, I only ever worked in England for a short while, and that was really interesting. But no, I wouldn't say I made a name for myself.
Well, what were the differences in so I'm just projecting so we can all.
Yes.
I'm not shouting at you. So what were the differences between what you experienced in England and what was happening in Perth?
Well, nothing much really, because I went over there in '78 with a band from Perth, and we did it was all as we were the resident band in a cabaret band, so a cabaret room, and it was fabulous. There were lots of big names over there. Once again, I never got to a nightclub with pop music, so I couldn't compare there. So what about you, John?
Basically, you're asking about our music. Would it go overseas? And is that what you're effectively asking? I'd have to say no. I think mainly it's... And to be fair, Perth had a reputation right across Australia at my stage of being, if you like, one of the groups generally were so well known for originality, style on stage, clothing that we wore, the amount of people that would attend all the shows. So that, to me, in my mind, still stands out. I heard that being a part-time historian, as you know, that I hear that from other, because I deal with a lot of people, as I said, on Facebook, and they just say, oh, you guys were top-notch. Don't forget, on my Facebook, I have a lot of musicians who now live elsewhere within Australia, and they tell me what's going on and what their stories are from their perspective, from basically the 70s onwards or whatever. So really, the West Australian music itself really stayed within Australia. Good example would be Johnny Gunn with Carol Leonard's Step Back. They were two very big singles for Johnny Gunn, written by who was it?
Was it Beaver you a fan of Young?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, he did exceptionally well, but did not go outside of Australia, unfortunately. It's true. Two very catchy songs. I wasn't involved personally on the tracks.
Johnny did try to go to England mid-60s.
Yes.
Yep, didn't go so well. He ended up in Germany for a little while. playing with a band there, and then found his way back to Australia, went to Melbourne, got on the radio, and the rest is history. Is shortly after that, it was young talent time, etc., etc.
Young talent time was so big for him. Well done.
Yeah, it was huge.
Hats off.
Absolutely.
I was just say that a lot of the bands that came over from the eastern states say that Perth had so many venues, and in case anybody doesn't remember, back in the early 70s, I can only talk about the newspapers. I mean, we had 3 or 4 pages full of venues advertising bands. I mean, it's just unheard of.
There were 2 bands that in the hearse left England and based themselves in Perth. Do you know who they were?
Just like Jones.
No, he's actually in the States. The Mixtures were the first ones from there.
Well, the mixtures had originated, the mixtures back in the day originated in Melbourne.
Is that right?
Yeah, Freddie Whelan was the rhythm guitarist at one stage, and the Idris brothers, Idris Joe, he's a brother. I can't remember. At one stage, what's his name? He's playing with the Troubadours at the moment. The drummer.
Gary Howard.
Hmm?
Gary Howard.
Gary Howard was the drummer in the mixtures in one version of the early mixtures in Australia.
The guy who joined from here, I went to school with, and you would know him, Brent Osdale. You know Brent?
Well, Brent came along a lot later. Brent came along back probably in the late 70s or even early 80s. Brent's still around.
Oh, yeah.
But Peter Williams, who lives in New Zealand, obviously, he became part of the mixers as well. One of our drummers from the Statesman, John Pekovich, who's passed away, he was also a drummer in the mixtures. The mixtures is another group which is similar to the Troubadours, where there's 50 or 60 people who claim to have been in the band, and I know everybody that's ever been in the Troubadours, but I get people saying, "Oh, I met a guy up in Port Hedland the other day, and he used to play with the Troubadours." I said, "Oh yeah, right." But it's just one of those things.
Was the other band that you mentioned came from the UK to Perth? Was it Chalice?
Yes.
Yeah, in the 70s.
All right, band. I got to mention something was shut up. The Queen, sorry. I kept it.
Bohemian Rhapsody. Oh, George and Les on guitar.
Right, here's something which is of interest. There was a group that many of us follow called the Shadows. The Cliff Richard and the Shadows, right? Do you realise that the lead guitarist from the Shadows has been living in West Australia for ages? I've actually met him, lovely guy, but I'm just saying, he had so much, if you like, what we did as musicians in Wimberley, we'd have to learn Apache, all these wonderful land, Geronimo, all these instrumentals. So I'd have to learn, obviously, to play all this stuff, and I tell you what, and he's still around, and he's still playing, and same with Cliff Richard Office. He loves Australia. He always stays with Hank B. Marvin, so they have ball chats and that sort of thing. So it's good to see that they're all still comrades, if you like, comrades in arms, as I call them. So it's wonderful.
Well, so to answer your question, perhaps Perth's music at that time didn't necessarily get to the world, but it seems as though the world has come to Perth. And perhaps that's a good spot to finish. We do actually need to ramp up. So I would like to thank very much our panellists, Peter Nell, John Mills and Jenny Wren. Please join me in thanking our panellists very much.